Hello there, good afternoon and welcome to the Weather Studio Live. I'm Clare and Aidan.
I'm Aidan McGivern. We're live from the Met Office headquarters in Exeter. We're here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Thank you for joining us. Busy show this week.
Yes, certainly is. We're talking about the volcano which has just erupted in the Philippines. Also, wildfires and climate change. Is there any correlation? We will be reviewing a rapid response review which was conducted by some of our climate scientists here at the Met Office.
Yeah, and there's loads going on with the UK weather. Low after low after low this week. Powerful jet stream, more wind and rain, warnings in force. Will it ever stop? Well, possibly. We'll have more on that in a moment. And of course, do send in your comments and questions.
Yes, please do. I'm here to answer them as best I can. We'll try and answer some during the course of the show, and if we can't answer them, we may well answer them next week. There have been some already sent in. Thank you for those. Any chance of snow for southeast England, either later this month or into January? This is the worst winter so far. There's no name on that, but obviously people desperate for snow. Still no signs of any significant snow, but in answer to Charlie White's question on YouTube, when will this bad weather stop? When will the nice weather start creeping in? We are going to get a change, a big change in weather type. More wet and windy weather to come this week, but by the weekend and certainly early next week, the weather looks like shifting to the other side of winter, colder but drier. Aidan will have more on that in a moment. And finally, for now, David Truth Pill on Twitter. I hope you mentioned how the wildfires are started by arsonists. If there weren't so many arsonists, there wouldn't be so many wildfires. Well, David, I've been looking for a tweet actually because I saw it the other day. There's a report in an Australian newspaper suggested only around about 10% of the fires have been started by arsonists. The rest have all been natural. So that's not necessarily true, David. I'll try and find that article if I can over the next 20 minutes or so. That's all for now. Do keep sending your questions in, but for now, back to you two.
Thanks very much, Alex. Behind me is quite a stunning photograph, particularly if you're looking at it from Exeter in the Met Office here rather than just sitting very close to that volcano. This is the volcano, isn't it, which erupted on Sunday.
And this was posted to the Met Office Twitter feed, but it was taken by this chap up here, Big Dom Car 03 on Instagram. Here's another stunning shot. Well, basically, there was a big eruption of this volcano in the Philippines, the second most active Filipino volcano, not far from really populated parts of the Philippines, including Manila, just a few tens of kilometers from Manila. And it erupted and it sent this cloud of ash. It was a big ash fall. But what you can see here is the lightning that you often get associated with volcanic eruptions. And we covered Flammagenitus last week, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And the lightning strikes tend to be associated with really explosive events when rock from the surrounding crater is thrust up into the atmosphere and breaks up into small pieces. So they're sharp and they're also quite solid. And it's the static electricity from those little pieces of rock rather than just the ash, which creates that electrical charge. And when that electrical charge separates, that's when you get the lightning. So it looks stunning from afar, but Filipino authorities are suggesting people flee from this area, a radius of 14 kilometres, and that's around about 450,000 people. So this volcano in itself lies on the Filipino fault zone. It's a very, very active fault line, so it does happen. But this volcano actually sits within a lake, so certainly there is some scope for safety around that. But because it's such an immense volcanic eruption, obviously it can spew much further than that. And these photos really show what's happening. So currently the ash is about 1 kilometre into the air. It has caused travel disruption across the major airport in the Philippines. It's only just opened again, and there's been something like 50 volcanic earthquakes detected in the last few hours just surrounding it. So it's a very volcanic and seismic active area. And it's likely to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, let's show some time-lapse imagery actually. That's a stunning picture in itself, but here's a time-lapse. It's taken by Joshua Bobadilla, and you can see the flashes of lightning there, can't you, with the rising ash. Incredible.
Well, it last erupted in 1977, but it is actually one of the top 10 most active volcanoes in the world. And they've been saying since around, 1991, it's going to erupt again. So it's taken quite a few years for that to happen. But certainly, yes, it is active now, and it's likely to remain so for a while. And historically, Tal has claimed between about 5,000 and 6,000 people through decades, if not centuries. So it's a vicious beast, and needs to, you need to stay well away from it. And obviously, volcanoes were in the news just a few months ago. White Island in New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
Lives in December. But what is the biggest volcano in the world? The most active and biggest volcano in the world?
What is the biggest and most active? They're the same thing, are they? The biggest
Yes.
and most... Pinatubo.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a second. What is the definition of an active volcano? How many eruptions over how long?
Taking me back to GCSE geography now.
What do you know?
It's quite a long time, isn't it, before it's classified as it's dormant.
It's a geological timeframe rather
there's
than
dormant, and then there's extinct, and then
it's
there's active.
10,000 years, only one eruption in 10,000 years. And so how many active volcanoes do we have in the world right now?
Oh.
Well, so it only has to have had one eruption in the last 10,000
yes.
years to be classed as active. I'd say 30 then.
No, it's actually...
2,000.
Well done. Actually,
it?
it's 1,500. It is 1,500. Well done, a point.
He was
to
over,
Aidan.
though. I was under. It doesn't count if he's over.
And finally, after we go back to the big question, how many erupting volcanoes on average are there at any one time? So, what was your...
250.
30.
40 to 50. So yes, you're in the right ballpark, considering we're talking geological time rather than
School for Mr.
So
Deacon.
let's just go back to the
Do a
original
geography
question,
degree.
and this is an interesting one. It's something we have talked about. We have talked about this place because it has some significance when it comes to climate change and greenhouse gases, which is quite appropriate considering volcanoes do spew a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere as well. What volcano measures CO2? Hawaii?
Mauna
Loa. Mauna
Yeah.
Loa in Hawaii, which has erupted now continuously for the last 700,000 years, most recently 1984. So there you go.
So that is an active volcano.
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, it's a fascinating area of study, particularly if you're studying them at distance, because people do get caught.
Ben Ward on YouTube asked, what percentage of global carbon emissions are due to volcanic activity? It's another good quiz question that we don't know the answer to off the top of our heads.
However, we know someone who could probably answer that. I'm thinking an atmospheric scientist who answered a question from last week.
Right.
But we'll get on that in a moment.
Actually,
Yes.
I read about this, and it doesn't really make a dent in global greenhouse gas emissions. It doesn't make a huge dent, unless obviously they all sort of erupted at the same time. But it does have local and temporary effects on sunlight and also the temperature of the local atmosphere, if not the region, because mostly volcanoes spew sulfur and ash, which actually reflects sunlight. So you can get a cooling, as well as perhaps the offsetting of the warming from greenhouse gases, which is mostly CO2 and water vapour.
Yeah, we had the cooling effect in 1991, didn't we, after Pinatubo erupted. 1816, there was a year without summer because of a huge volcanic eruption. And so, yeah, you do get these temporary effects. But of course, the long-term impact at the moment are the human-induced emissions of greenhouse gases and the long-term
Yeah, it doesn't offset it. Basically.
rise of...
For more information, if you are concerned, have family out there, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. It's a really good website with lots of really good information on and breaking news as well. Alex, any questions?
Yeah, loads coming in. Thank you very much for all of those. Just to go back to that point I made at the start about how many wildfires in Australia have been caused by arson. A quote here from the Guardian newspaper. The Victoria Police say they do not believe that arson has had a role in any of the destructive fires so far this summer. That's in Victoria. And in New South Wales, and they think the percentage is very small. The vast majority have been caused by lightning. Other questions coming in. That one about percentage of global carbon emissions due to volcanic emission from Ben Ward on YouTube. Thanks for that question. Just been answered there. Nathan Appley on Facebook. Are the temperatures going to drop? They could be about to drop, but not until the end of the week. Moritz Oppelar on YouTube. What's the weather like for skiing in Austria? Well, not a lot of fresh snow, I don't think. I mean, it could be a little bit this week, but thankfully they did get a lot for the ski scene earlier in the winter. So there's still some pretty good conditions to be had over the Alps. The Pyrenees struggling a little bit. One last one for now that I want to answer. Ringo Cat on YouTube. Has Alex dyed his hair? And if so, what does he use? I get this all the time. I used to get this when I was at the BBC. People think I dye my hair. I swear I do not dye it. It's just the lights in here look a little bit bizarre.
You're just youthful.
It's just the way it looks. It's the way it looks under the lights. I used to get it all the time. I get accusations of dyeing my hair.
But
Honestly, Ringo, if I did, I'm happy to grow old gracefully. If I did dye, I'd let you know. But honestly, I don't. Anyway, on that bombshell, let's go back to the UK weather.
Yeah, so yesterday we had Storm Brendan. This was the picture about 24 hours ago from space. You can see this huge swirl, and Storm Brendan, is what we call a weather bomb or explosive cyclogenesis, to give it its proper term. It deepened so rapidly during Sunday and Monday, and then we ended up with this swirl. What was it? 48 millibars in the space of 24 hours.
40 in 18.
40 in 18 hours.
Hold
We ended
on,
up with this swirl, and a very wet and windy day for most of us on Monday.
What's the highest gust? What has it been?
I can't remember, 80 something.
Yeah,
the official,
I think so.
the highest official gust was 84.
It was
80?
high, yeah. It was higher ones over the mountains, wasn't it? But the low-level sites, it was
In excess of 70, I think 87 in the
76
Western Highlands.
knots, wasn't it?
It was actually during Monday evening, so we had a swathe of very wet and windy weather across the country as a warm front and cold front went through. That cold front was really active, lots of thunderstorms on that, quite a squally feature. But then behind that, we had this kick of, again, another swathe of very strong winds into Monday evening across the Western Isles, and big waves and coastal impacts. In addition to that, we had cold air arriving across the northern half of the country and frequent showers with snow and ice across parts of northern and central Scotland. Now we're looking at this, so it's a return to wind and rain once again quite quickly on the heels of Storm Brendan. Let's put on the pressure chart there. That's Brendan. It's not moved far, so it's still bringing quite tight isobars to Scotland. It's still bringing a windy day here. But this other little feature has also deepened rapidly, and it's now brought, well, it's raining outside here in Exeter. It's quickly bringing a return to wet and windy conditions across the UK. And that's why there are, again, more weather warnings in force. So I'm just going to play that forward. Rest of today, basically, there we go. Just to summarise the weather warnings, first of all. Wind warning there for Western Scotland for the rest of today. It's not going to be as windy as it was during Monday, but still the risk of 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts. And a little increase later on Tuesday in those wind speeds. Across much of England and Wales, again, windy for the rest of today, with the risk of 50, possibly 55 mile per hour wind gusts, especially across southern and southwestern areas, and around coastal and hill sites, so around exposed sites, 70 mile per hour wind gusts. I imagine Needles, it's always sticking out there, always gets somewhere a little bit higher, but it's not particularly representative of elsewhere. And then within this area, we've also got a rain warning, which kicks in for Tuesday afternoon until Wednesday morning, because further wet weather is not going to be welcomed for these southern counties of England, looking at Hampshire into Kent, Sussex and so on, 20 up to 40 mils in places. So yeah, a very wet and windy spell for the rest of the day. You can see there the extent of the wind and rain. The rain, as it pushes into southern Scotland, will fall as snow over the tops of the southern uplands, tops of the south of the Grampians, above 400, 500 metres or so. And the worst of the winds eases off after midnight across western parts of Britain, but it continues to be very wet and windy there across the southeast. And it's in this area where it will actually be windier, won't it, compared to Storm Brendan. But of course, Storm Brendan was named by Met Erin. It didn't warrant a naming from the UK Met Office. Essentially, it's just a kind of yellow warning wind event through the rest of today and into early Wednesday.
And a lot of high waves. We've seen some coastal overtopping of high waves, particularly across Scotland, the west and east coast. And certainly the brunt will be down towards the southeast as well through the next 24 hours.
Yeah, just to give you a snapshot there finally of the wind speeds. This is, say, around rush hour on Tuesday. And we've got the strongest winds at this stage, southern counties of England, inland 50, 55 mile per hour wind gusts. Along the coast, a bit higher, 60, perhaps 70. And there, again, northwest Scotland. In between, not quite as windy, but northwest Scotland there, 60, 70 mile per hour wind gusts.
And we're not out of the windy regime yet, are we?
No, so a brief break on Wednesday. Let's play that forward. It's still going to be a wet and windy start to the day for East Anglia in the southeast. It takes some time for the weather system to get out of the way here. And then Wednesday itself, well, it's a blustery day. There'll be further showers, there'll be further gusty winds, especially for the north and west of Scotland there. But for many places, once that rain's out of the way, it's a brighter day and there'll be plenty of sunshine for central and eastern England. But yeah, lots of quite lively showers for northern and western Britain, and again some mountain snow for Scotland out of those showers. Not quite as low in terms of the snow for Wednesday compared to how we started today, for example. It's more likely to be 400 or 500 metres. But actually, let's put on the wind gust graphic, see if it picks out anything. So yeah, again, we've got wind gusts 60 mile per hour or so for exposed parts of Scotland there for Wednesday. So it is again going to be a blustery day. But fast forwarding to Thursday, and well, another low is on the way. Another feature being developed by the jet stream, which, there we go, it's just down there. Put on the right weather graphic. There's the jet stream. It picks up this area of low pressure Wednesday night into Thursday and sends it across the UK. And again, another spell of wind and rain. Not looking as significant as yesterday's low or Storm Brendan or today's low, but still the potential there across, say, Irish Sea coastal areas of quite significant wind gusts. Gales around exposed coastal parts of the Irish Sea into southwest Scotland, and some wet weather moving in as well. So yeah, that's Thursday.
Okay, but you know, the weekend is looming, and we'll talk about that in a moment, shall we?
Potential for a change on the way.
Excellent. Lots of really great questions coming in. Thank you for all of those. Amanda Victoria on Facebook. Why is today not a named storm when the winds are worse than yesterday? Well, it's a really good question, a really good point made out. As Aidan just made the point there, the storm was actually named by Met Aidan. So for the effects across the UK, yesterday's winds and today's not reaching the criteria of a named storm, neither of them. Yesterday, the strongest winds were in the west, and yesterday's winds overall will be stronger than today's. But you make a good point that across much of the Midlands and eastern England, today the winds are stronger, but both categorised in the yellow and so not nameable. If you follow us on Twitter or you go to our sister channel, there's an explainer on there about how we name storms that might help you out there. Luke Cowling on YouTube. There is warming happening at the highest level of the stratosphere. Is this significant? Well, I'm not sure about that, Luke. And there's another question also about that, which is about sudden stratospheric warming. And basically, is there any sign of the stratosphere slowing down? I think Aidan will have this more on this in a moment, but there's basically no sign that the stratospheric polar jet is at or near record levels again. So that is remaining very strong. So there's no sign of sudden stratospheric warming, which can then lead to things turning colder and a possible easterly wind setting up, so-called beast from the east. There's no real sign of that. However, there are signs of it getting colder as we go into next week, as Aidan will point out. And the two things are not always linked, so you can get colder spells without the sudden stratospheric warming, as we will see in a moment, no doubt, with Aidan. There it is. Bob Grace, is the polar vortex likely to weaken anytime soon? Thanks for the question, Bob. The short answer to that is no, it looks pretty strong. Nicholas Chamberlain on Facebook talking about yesterday's narrow band of heavy rain that moved across. That was a squall line. And again, if you search on YouTube for the Met Office squall line, you should get a little bit of an explainer about that. And just finally for now, Fraser 1814 on YouTube. If global warming is responsible for the highest tides in Venice for 50 years that we saw at the end of last year, what has caused the canals to be empty at the moment? Well, I think what you need to understand there, Fraser, is the extremes. It's global climate change affects extremes. So it makes the flooding in Venice. Venice is always going to flood because of its position, but it makes the flooding worse when it does happen. It's the extremes. It's not just the flooding is caused by climate change. It's not as simple as that. It's the extremes that are enhanced by climate change. So both are to do with climate change, actually. And finally, I want to answer a question from last week, because last week, Callum Kent, we talked about flammagenitus clouds and the clouds caused by the wildfires sparking or creating their own thunderstorms, which then spark lightning. And a great question from Callum Callum Kent on YouTube. Can pyrocumulus or flammagenitus clouds produce a tornado? Now, last week we weren't sure. We thought they might be able to, not sure. But we're in the place that knows the answers because our colleague, Will Thurston, kindly sent us an email. Top guy. He's an atmospheric dispersion scientist, and he just sent us an email straight after the show saying, we're watching the show. And the answer to that question is, can a flammagenitus produce a genuine tornado? And the answer is yes. In 2003, the Canberra fires produced the first ever documented example in which the CB, the cumulonimbus from one of the fires, developed an F2 tornado. The F2 is the Fujita scale of tornadoes, so it goes from 0 to 6, so it's the third highest on the scale. And there's a paper that it's written up in, and then there's been other examples as well that he quotes. In 2018, a car fire in California produced a deep, greater than 5 kilometer rotating vortex of tornadic strength, although the jury is out as to whether it was a genuine tornado or just an intense mesocyclone. So yes, there have been documents. He also links to a couple of papers, and hopefully we'll be able to put that link in the YouTube bio, so you'll be able to go and read about those papers if you are interested. So yes, flammagenitus clouds and thunderstorms that are generated by these wildfires can produce tornadoes.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
Speaking of wildfires, you know, we talked about Australia last week. It's been in the news a lot, but actually there's been a timely report, hasn't there, into this?
Yes, there has. The report came out today, and it was conducted by UEA, the University of East Anglia, the Tyndall Centre there, as well as authors here at the Hadley Centre. That's our climate centre here at the Met Office. And they reviewed very, very quickly 57 peer-reviewed studies on the correlation between wildfires and climate change.
What did they conclude?
Well, they concluded that there was a high correlation between the both, and in particular the severity of wildfires across the world, and not only that, the frequency of these wildfires and impacts of global warming and climate change, in particular drought and heat waves, exacerbate the situation. Not only that, the wildfire season has extended, and we've been talking about that quite a lot in Australia. So yes, a number of factors which are leading to the fact that yes, this situation is getting pretty much worse. And obviously Australia has not been out of the headlines for the last few months because of it, and the drought's been going for about 3 years or so. So yes, the combination of many of those things. It's not just Australia, it's not just the US where we see a lot of wildfires. They are across many parts of the world, prone areas, obviously Africa, Amazonia, where we saw last summer, I think a football pitch worth of forest was being burnt every minute or so. It was absolutely horrific. But also, interestingly, Siberia's had its fair share. And it's not just the fires which can get out of control and you can just lose a lot of forest. It's the greenhouse gases it releases once those fires are burnt, in particular, not just CO2, but also methane, which is more of a potent greenhouse gas.
Yeah, just showing on the screen here, active fires. This is a NASA animation, active fires each month since 2003 or so, and just showing the sort of yearly variability of those fires and their distribution. Really interesting, you know, the areas they affect. So we talk a lot about them affecting Australia and Canada, the Amazon, but yeah, quite a few of them in Russia there, and a fair number across Africa as well. Was there anything else in this report?
Well, interestingly, they do talk about some fires actually losing their potency because of deforestation. So it's looking at one as well as the other. It's looking how humans have affected the distribution of the forests and also the severity of the fires when they happen. And what the conclusions are is that yes, it looks like the controlling or deforestation of forests has reduced the amount of the extent of the wildfires, but for closed canopy forests, like we see in Australia a lot, they are pretty much wild and they are out of control, and the severity has increased, and that is down to climate change. Although they do have a wildfire season, it is worse and the frequency is greater.
Yeah, bringing it back to Australia, there is news of rainfall during the next week or so in those areas that are particularly affected at the moment, New South Wales and Victoria. Now, just playing that through. So on Wednesday and into Thursday, there are areas of showers and thunderstorms expected to develop across this area, starting off in central Victoria and then moving into New South Wales. Now, thunderstorms can be a double-edged sword where wildfires are concerned, because as we heard, a lot of the wildfires have been started in Australia by lightning, and so the lightning from these thunderstorms could cause further wildfires to develop, particularly if these shower clouds or these thunderstorms are high up and not much rainfall reaches the ground. You still get the lightning hitting the ground. So there's the risk of that, and there's the risk during the next few days in parts of Victoria and New South Wales that we'll see a lot of rainfall onto parched ground, which can cause a flash flooding risk. But it seems to be better news towards the end of the weekend and into the start of next week. What happens initially is that the wettest weather moves into eastern parts of New South Wales and Victoria, and that's where we'll see the highest rainfall accumulations by the end of this week, 50 to 80 millimetres in places, but these are hit and miss showers and thunderstorms, so it won't be evenly distributed. Hopefully it will start to help extinguish some fires, but at first, during the next few days, it will be eastern areas. Now, this is the rainfall, no, that's not it. This is the rainfall map for Australia for the next 8 days.
So we can just see the outline of Australia there.
Yeah.
It's hard to depict, actually, isn't it? So
it is. It's not the best quality, but this is from the Bureau of Meteorology website, and it shows, this is eastern parts of New South Wales there. Here's Victoria, and it shows areas of rainfall. And this darker colour here, the green, I think, 50 to 100 millimetres over the next 8 days accumulating, which it will be beneficial because you don't want small amounts of rain. That can hamper efforts. We talked about that last week. So this is a decent amount of rainfall and reasonably decent amount of rainfall extending further inland to help put out some of the worst fires, hopefully. So yes, some good news there.
Good news. Alex?
Lots of more questions coming in. Jason Tasker on Facebook, when is the latest you can have snow? Well, there's no real limit to that. We've had snow across parts of southern England as late as June. So there's, if you're desperate for snow, and I know many people are, then yes, you can still get some. One person desperate. Sorry, his children are desperate. Yeah, we believe you, Steve. Steve Kennedy on Facebook. Will we ever get any snow? My kids have their sledges, never been used. It says asking on behalf of his children. We believe you. Well, it's just getting a bit colder as we go into early part of next week. Certainly it's just been too mild so far this winter. It is getting colder, but I must stress again, no sign of any significant snowfall. Is there any chance of that high pressure shifting and getting an easterly? Again, at the moment it looks like the high is just going to shift further south, allowing milder and westerly winds into the north. So we'll have more on this in the 10-day trend tomorrow. Why has the winter been so mild? Well, it's basically the position of the jet stream. It's been further south, and that's been driving a lot of wet weather our way and not many storms, as we will talk about in a moment. And could climate change not just be a cycle that the planet goes through? Daniel Landels on Facebook. Well, thank you for your question, Darren. Could climate change not just be a cycle? People take into account, the scientists take into account the cycle of the planet. Yes, we know that the planet goes through these cycles. It's been a lot colder in the past. It has also been warmer at times in the past as well. The problem at the moment, the current situation, is the rate of change. It's the speed at which our planet is warming up. That is the serious problem. That is what climate change is all about. It's the rate of change, the rapid rise in temperatures around the globe that we've never seen before. It's never been recorded before. And the relationship, the direct relationship with carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that you can trace back throughout millennia. Boney Gator on YouTube, anyone know how to take a Mark IV golf bumper off? Well, I'm not quite sure that's weather related. What I would do is call the RAC, and while you're waiting for them to turn up, watch the rest of this and other previous episodes of the Weather Studio Live. Yeah. That's all for now.
Great advice. There's a question there, wasn't there?
Yeah, something about a school line today. Finn McCavan on Facebook. Any school lines for today? Chancellor suggesting one between 1700 and 1800 hours.
Here we go. This is 1700 today, and yes, there is a score line, what we call line convection, developing on the cold front. Now, we had that yesterday. Storm Brendan moved through in a really lively feature with thunderstorms and a sudden upturn in wind gusts. This is similar, but perhaps not quite as potent. However, let's just run that forward because it actually becomes even more distinct on the rainfall forecast there as it moves into southeastern England. You can see that very thin line, can't you? It's called line convection. It's where you basically get a narrow corridor of suddenly heavy rainfall and strong gusty winds. And you know when that goes through because the weather turns quite wild outside, and that's probably what's going to happen as the cold front moves through, followed by a marked drop off in temperature behind that. So yeah, there is. That's the answer to that.
So is there any light at the end of the tunnel? That's what I want to know. Are we going to see any dry weather for the weekend?
Well, let's have a look at what's been going on recently. We've had the jet stream. We talked a lot about that. Moving it forward to, say, Thursday there, and you can see it's just a flat pattern across the Atlantic. It's helping to pick up low after low and send them our way. But often we can look at developments on the other side of the Atlantic and sometimes on the other side of the USA and Canada and see a ripple effect take place. And that is what's happening by Thursday. So let's play that forward. And watch this jet stream. It dives south over parts of Western Canada and US. It's driving a cold plunge south, really low temperatures in this part of the world, northwestern parts of North America. But what that helps to do is it sends a ripple effect downstream. So playing that forward, and you can see the jet stream, even as soon as Friday, starts to become a lot more amplified on the other side of the Atlantic. And then that, well, a huge change compared to what we've had recently. Flat jet stream sending lows in. This is a much more amplified setup, much more curvy. It's like the difference between a superhighway and a country lane. Low pressure can't move as far and as fast, and it's essentially not pointed towards us anymore. So, in the wake of the low pressures, and with the jet stream turning into a more amplified setup, we get high pressure building by Saturday. So one more unsettled day on Friday, heavy showers around, and then Saturday, just that happens, high pressure building in.
Could be a frost on Saturday night, a fairly widespread one.
Yeah, it's going to turn colder because that high actually builds into relatively cold, clean air. So that means that temperatures will be on the low side, not desperately cold, but frosty nights, frosty mornings, and single figures by day. But the good thing about the high building into relatively cold, clean air is that you'll have plenty of sunshine by day as well. So
lovely.
I think most places will have a sunny, crisp winter weekend.
We're due for it, aren't we? We are.
More overdue. It'll be the first one of the year.
Yeah.
First one, well, widely, I guess, for the winter. I don't know.
And the chief was talking about that, the deputy chief, this morning in the brief, and suggesting that actually this could extend into the working week next week.
Yeah, so the signs are that that high pressure, once it builds in, could stick around for some time. The graphics here go up to the end of Sunday. You can see, look at the isobars, you can see that high pressure intensifies over the UK. It tends to be sitting over southern parts of Britain, so that will still allow some cloud and some wind and some rain into the far north and northwest of Scotland. But it's quite a strong high pressure, and it's likely to stick around through the bulk of next week. Someone asked about the stratospheric polar vortex, which of course is this rotating pool of intense cold way up above the North Pole. When it is particularly robust, which it has been through the winter at the moment, then it tends to help support a strong jet stream as well, and that's what's been happening. There's actually no change forecast with that strong, robust stratospheric polar vortex. So this high pressure building isn't because that's breaking down or anything. And if anything, looking towards the end of January, it might suggest that we'll see a return to more unsettled weather again, because that polar vortex will remain there. It will continue to drive the jet stream and so on. But that's way off. That's what we've got in store for the weekend.
Obviously more details on the 10-day trend tomorrow. Who's doing it?
Me. It is I am on 10-day trending tomorrow, so yeah, we'll have more details on that big change, that big shift, and we'll be looking at whether there's any hint of an easterly within that high at the moment. As I say, must stress, no significant sign of easterly winds or no widespread heavy snow expected, but it is going to turn colder the other side of winter. Other questions coming in. Simon Galliandro on YouTube asked, what is the highest wind speed ever recorded? According to the WMO, it's 408 kilometers per hour, associated with tropical cyclones. Cyclone Olivia in 1996. Took a while for that to be verified. Obviously, some of the strongest winds can be up to 300 miles an hour, which are associated with tornadoes, but it's quite hard to measure those because if you put an anemometer anywhere near it, they tend to get blown apart. So there's not a solid enough structure to measure the winds close to tornadoes, but you can kind of get a grip of the winds from the Doppler radar. So some of the strongest winds on Earth are thought to occur from tornadoes, but the strongest one ever recorded officially, according to the WMO, 408 kilometers per hour from 1996 in Australia. Will all this volcanic activity affect the climate? Like when Krakatoa exploded, and of course we had Mount Pinatubo, of course, affecting global temperatures back in the 90s. Well, it's taken into effect. The thing about the moment is not the volcanic the volcanic activity is nothing particularly active at the moment in terms of widespread, huge amounts of smoke. So they're ongoing, obviously, as we talked about. There's 30 to 40 erupting at any one time.
I think they're saying it's about 1 kilometre into the atmosphere, where we're looking at 15 kilometres really. I think Mount Pinatubo was around 20 kilometres, so that's why it affected the climate.
So it affects the climate differently.
Stratospheric.
Good question, though. Chris A on YouTube does a scoreline equal a derecho, which is a really great question. The derecho is a North American phenomenon. They're not quite the same, but they do have similar characteristics. A derecho is a straight line wind, so it's not a tornado, but it is associated with a line of thunderstorms. This was more, a scoreline is more from a weather front, but they do have very similarities, and they're kind of derechos are on a larger scale and tend to happen in the US under warmer weather, April to August. So a score line feature can happen on a cold front on a smaller scale, almost anywhere. And lots of other people asking about the high pressure coming in next week, as you've just talked about. And yeah, that's about it for now.
Thanks very much.
Great.
Well, that's all from us. Thank you very much for joining us today. Weather Snap podcast is out on Thursday, and we'll be discussing our latest report, which is coming out regarding climate change and the oceans and the seas. It's a very interesting report, and we'll be discussing that on that podcast. Alex? I wanted to flag as well, keep your eyes peeled for tomorrow. There will be the global temperatures will be released, so the review of 2019's global temperatures, and also for the decade as well. So keep your eyes peeled, make sure you're following the Met Office, and there'll be lots of updates on that tomorrow. And if you want any more information about wildfires and climate change in the report, which was released today, it's also on our website.
Great. Thank you for joining us, and hope you can join us again soon. We'll be back next week. See you then.